The stars were silent, but the massive ship hummed with the energy of its first launch. The crew gathered in their designated stations, their eyes filled with excitement and fear. This was humanity's greatest achievement, the Horizon, a ship built not just to explore, but to connect with the unknown. It was said to be the largest ship ever constructed, a symbol of human determination and ambition. Captain Elizabeth North stood at the front of the command deck, her fingers lightly touching the controls. She could feel the weight of history on her shoulders. This mission would be the first step toward exploring uncharted space, to make first contact with alien species and unlock the mysteries of the universe. But even she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. A strange unease gripped her, something beyond the normal pre-launch nerves. Behind her, the rest of the crew was busy checking systems and finalizing preparations. Lieutenant Aaron Delgado, the ship's communications officer, was sitting at his console, running through routine checks on the ship's communication systems. He, like the others, had been part of the project for years. They had worked together, trained together, and now they were about to embark on something no one else had ever done. And yet, there was a strange tension in the air that couldn't be ignored. The ship's engines roared to life as the countdown reached 0. Slowly, the Horizon began to lift off from the Earth's surface, its massive structure rising higher and higher into the dark expanse of space. Outside, the Earth shrank smaller and smaller until it was just a distant blue dot. For a brief moment, the crew was awed by the beauty of the view. But that awe quickly gave way to the realities of their mission. As the Horizon ascended, the crew settled into their tasks. The ship's AI, a highly advanced system named Aurelia, monitored everything. It kept the crew informed about the ship's systems and any anomalies. At first, there was nothing out of the ordinary. All systems were functioning as they should. But then, something strange happened. A low, almost imperceptible hum filled the room. It wasn't the sound of the ship's engines or anything that could be explained. It was something else, something unfamiliar. Captain North turned her head, her eyes narrowing. "Aurelia, is there anything on the scanners?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Aurelia's calm, robotic voice replied, "All systems are operating within normal parameters, Captain. No unusual activity detected, but something still felt off." The hum didn't go away. It seemed to pulse as if it was coming from somewhere deep within the ship. And then it stopped. Just like that. The silence that followed was even more unnerving than the hum itself. "Did anyone else hear that?" Aaron asked, glancing up from his console. The others nodded, but no one spoke. It wasn't something that could be easily explained, but they all felt it. A sense of unease had settled over them. The ship had only just begun its journey, and already it seemed as though something was trying to communicate, something they couldn't understand. As the crew continued their work, they couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. The feeling grew stronger as they traveled deeper into space. It was as if the very stars themselves were watching them, waiting for something to happen. Hours passed, and the horizon of Earth was nothing but a memory. Now, the ship was in the vast, empty stretch of space. Captain North stood at the front of the command deck, looking out into the infinite blackness. It was beautiful, yes, but it was also isolating. There were no other ships, no signs of life, nothing but endless space. And yet, that strange feeling still lingered. Something was out there, just beyond the edges of their sensors. Aaron turned to the captain. "We're approaching the coordinates for the first probe scan, Captain. It's time to see what's out there." Captain North nodded, her fingers hovering over the controls. "All right, let's begin the scan. All systems, stay alert." The ship's AI activated the scanning systems, and for a moment, everything seemed normal. But then, the scanners began to pick up something unusual. At first, it was faint to ripple in the fabric of space, a disturbance that seemed to come and go. The crew stared at the monitors, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. "Captain, there's something out there," Aaron said, his voice trembling. "It's not like anything we've ever seen before. It's too organized, Captain." North's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean, organized?" "I don't know, but it feels like it's sending us a signal," Aaron replied. Before the captain could respond, the lights on the ship flickered. The hum that had filled the ship earlier returned, this time louder, more distinct. And then the ship's AI spoke again, its voice strangely urgent. "Captain, incoming transmission detected," Aurelia announced. "From where?" Captain North demanded, her heart racing. "Origin unknown. But it appears to be coming from the disturbance we just detected," the AI replied. The crew exchanged nervous glances. "What do we do?" Aaron asked. Captain North took a deep breath. "We need to investigate. Open a communication channel. Let's see what they want." But before anyone could respond, the ship's communication system blared to life. A voice, deep and distorted, echoed through the command deck, sending chills down the crew's spines. "Do not approach," the voice growled. "You do not know what you are dealing with. Turn back now, or you will regret it." The transmission was abruptly cut off, leaving the crew in stunned silence. For a moment, no one spoke. What was that? Who had just warned them? Captain North's voice broke the silence, barely above a whisper. "What have we gotten ourselves into?" The horizon had only just begun its journey, but the crew now faced a choice. The unknown awaited them, but was it worth the risk? The strange message, the disturbances, they couldn't ignore it. The feeling that something was wrong was growing stronger. They were no longer just explorers. They were intruders in a universe far more dangerous than they ever imagined. As the days passed, the horizon continued its journey deeper into the vast unknown, leaving behind the familiar stars and planets of their home galaxy. The crew had long since become accustomed to the endless silence of space, but as time wore on, an uncomfortable unease settled over the ship. Captain Elizabeth North stood at the front of the command deck, staring into the endless darkness. It was peaceful, but there was something else, something lurking in the quiet. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, and it wasn't just from the mysterious transmission they had received. The unsettling hum had started again, but this time it felt different. It was louder, more constant, and no one could explain why. It was as if the ship itself had a heartbeat, one that was somehow out of sync with the crew. Captain Aaron Delgado's voice interrupted her thoughts. "We're receiving another strange signal. It's faint, but it's coming from the same direction as the disturbance." The hairs on the back of Captain North's neck stood up. She hadn't expected another signal so soon, and certainly not one that came from the same area. She had hoped that the mysterious voice they'd heard earlier was just a fluke, a strange interference from an unknown source. But now, it seemed that wasn't the case. "Play it through," Captain North ordered, trying to keep her voice calm. The ship's AI, Aurelia, processed the signal and sent it to the command deck. The crew fell silent as they listened. The message was much different than the first one. This one wasn't threatening, but it was just as cryptic. "You have come too far," the voice said, its tone almost mournful. "You do not belong here. Turn back before it is too late." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the crew to sit in stunned silence. The warning was clear, but this time it seemed to come with a sense of sorrow rather than anger. "What do you think that means?" Aaron asked, looking to Captain North. She frowned, her mind racing. "I don't know, but I don't like it. Something's out there, and it doesn't want us here." Lieutenant Sarah Lee, the ship's science officer, stepped forward. "Captain, I've been analyzing the scans we've taken, and there's something strange about the region we're heading toward. It doesn't show up on any of our maps. It's almost as if it's hidden, like it doesn't want to be found. Captain North turned to face Sarah. What do you mean by hidden? There are no stars in that section of space, Captain. It's like an empty void. But the scans suggest there's something there, something massive, Sarah explained. Her voice filled with concern. Captain North's heart sank. They had come so far, and now it felt like they were walking into a trap. The mysterious signals, the strange disturbance. And now the warning it all pointed to something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. She had hoped that their mission would bring humanity closer to the stars, to peaceful exploration. But now she wasn't so sure. Are we still on course? Captain North asked, trying to stay calm. We are, Aaron confirmed. But if we continue, we'll be entering that region in a few hours. Should we change course? Sarah asked. Captain North hesitated. Part of her wanted to turn back to avoid whatever lay ahead. But she couldn't ignore the voice that had warned them. Could they really turn back now, after everything they had sacrificed to get here? She had to know what was out there. No, she said finally. We keep going. But we stay alert. If we encounter any more signals or disturbances, we pull back immediately. The crew nodded in agreement, though none of them felt fully convinced. The unease continued to grow, a weight in the air that no one could shake. The next few hours passed in tense silence. The hum that had once been a background noise grew louder, almost suffocating in its intensity. It felt like the ship was alive, pulsating with energy. It was a strange sensation, one that made the crew feel small and insignificant, as if they were no longer in control of their own fate. Aurelia's voice suddenly cut through the tension. Captain, I am detecting an anomaly ahead. It's massive and unlike anything we've encountered. It appears to be a large object, but its exact shape is difficult to determine. Captain North felt her pulse quicken. What kind of object are we talking about? It is not fully solid, Captain Aurelia explained. It appears to be shifting, as though it's not fully materialized. The scans are inconsistent. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. What could it be? Nothing? In their training had prepared them for something like this. The unknown had always been part of the mission, but now the unknown seemed more terrifying than they had ever imagined. Can we get a visual? Captain North asked. Aurelia complied, sending the data to the view screen in front of them. The crew gasped as the screen flickered to life. Ahead of them, floating in the emptiness of space, was an object unlike anything they had ever seen. It was enormous, almost unfathomably so. Its surface was dark, with swirling patterns that seemed to shift and change, as if the very fabric of reality was warping around it. It didn't look like a ship, but it didn't look like anything else either. There were no lights, no engines, no signs of life, just an eerie, shifting mass suspended in the black void. It's beautiful, Lieutenant Delgado whispered. His voice filled with awe, but there was something unsettling about its beauty. It was almost as if the object wasn't meant to exist, as if it had been pulled from another reality and placed here in this empty space. Should we approach it? Sarah asked, her voice shaky. She was usually the one to remain calm, but even she couldn't hide the fear in her eyes. Captain North took a deep breath, her mind racing. This was the moment. They had come this far, and there was no turning back. Now, whatever that thing was, they had to approach it. There were answers to be found, answers that could change everything. Yes, Captain North said firmly. Prepare for approach, but do so cautiously. We don't know what we're dealing with. The crew worked quickly, preparing for the encounter. The ship's engines hummed, and slowly the horizon began to move toward the mysterious object. The closer they got, the more distorted the object seemed, as though it was bending the very space around it. It didn't make sense, but that was the least of their worries. Suddenly, the lights on the ship flickered once again. This time, it wasn't just the lights. The entire ship seemed to shake, as if it had been struck by some invisible force. The hum grew louder, deafening, as though the ship itself was being pulled toward the object. "What's happening?" Aaron shouted, gripping his console. "I don't know," Sarah cried, her fingers flying over the controls. "The systems are going haywire. The object hits. It's alive." The ship groaned, its metal walls creaking as if they were under immense pressure. It felt like the very fabric of the horizon was being stretched and pulled by some unseen force. And then, with a terrible screech, the ship's AI, Aurelia, spoke one final time. "You should not have come." The voice echoed, more distorted than before. "Now you are ours." The ship shuddered violently, and the crew braced themselves for what was to come. The horizon was no longer a place of peace. The uneasy hum had turned into a deafening roar, shaking the ship as if it were caught in a storm. The metal walls groaned under unseen pressure, and the ship's systems flickered in and out of stability. The crew scrambled to maintain control, their hands moving frantically across consoles, trying to make sense of the chaos unfolding around them. Captain Elizabeth North stood firm at the front of the command deck, her face pale but determined. The eerie voice from the object, "You should not have come," still echoed in her mind, reverberating through the very core of the ship. The mysterious anomaly, now fully visible on their monitors, had grown even larger and more menacing in its presence. It wasn't just a strange object anymore. It was a live variant. It was not happy to see them. "Captain." Aaron Delgado's voice broke through her thoughts, tense and urgent. "We've lost control of the navigation systems. The ship's autopilot is taking over, heading straight toward the anomaly." "What do you mean, taking over?" Captain North asked, her voice steady, despite the fear crawling beneath her skin. "I mean that the ship is moving on its own, Captain. No input from us. The systems are locking us into a course we can't change." Captain North's stomach sank. "What's the status of the shields?" "Shielding is holding, but barely. It's like something's draining our energy. I don't know how much longer we can last." The ship lurched again, throwing the crew off balance. The strange object in front of them loomed larger on the view screen, and it now looked more like a colossal mass, with tentacle-like extensions reaching out from its core. The swirls on its surface seemed to pulse with energy, and for a split second, Captain North could have sworn she saw something an eye, hidden within its depths, watching them. "Can we communicate with it?" Sarah Lee, the ship's science officer, asked, her voice tight with tension. "We've been trying," Aaron replied, his fingers flying across the communication panel. "But every time we try to send a message, it's blocked. It's almost as if it's scrambling our signals before we can even transmit. We need to get out of here," Sarah said, her voice filled with fear. "Whatever that thing is, it's not something we can understand. We don't belong here." Captain North looked at her crew, knowing that they were all scared. She was scared too, but she had to remain strong. They had come too far to turn back now. "We can't just leave," she said firmly, her voice unwavering. "We need to understand what's going on. This ship, this mission, meets bigger than any of us. We have to see this through." The tension in the room was palpable. The crew knew that the choice to continue could very well be the last decision they ever made. But Captain North's words had an undeniable power. There was no turning back now. The horizon had crossed a line, and whatever awaited them on the other side of that line, they had to face it head-on. A loud, ominous bang echoed through the ship, followed by a sudden silence. The lights flickered and then stabilized, but the feeling of dread hung in the air like a thick fog. It was as if the entire ship had just been jolted by an unseen hand. The ship's AI, Aurelia, spoke again, but this time her voice was different, distorted, as though something was interfering with her programming. Warning, Aurelia's voice crackled. Foreign entity detected. Entity now boarding, ... Incoming, ... Boarding. Aaron exclaimed, his face pale. What does that mean? Is it coming on board? The sound of metal scraping against metal rang through the corridors of the ship. It was unmistakable. Someone was trying to breach the horizon. Secure all bulkheads, Captain North commanded, her heart pounding. Prepare for the words died on her lips as the ship was rocked by a violent force. The crew was thrown from their feet as the gravity system flickered, and they were weightless for a moment. It felt like the entire ship was under attack from the outside, but there was no way to know what was causing it. We need to get to the escape pods, Aaron suggested, but Captain North shook her head. No. If we leave the ship, we abandon everything. We stand and fight. We're not running. The ship shuddered again, this time from within. It was no longer just a mechanical disturbance. There was something alive on board. The alien presence had made its move. A chilling hiss echoed through the comm system, followed by a strange, guttural sound, almost like whispering. Did you hear that? Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. It's speaking. But I don't understand it. Focus, Captain North snapped, forcing herself to ignore the rising panic in her chest. We need to find out what it wants. We're not going down without answers. A flashing light on one of the consoles drew their attention. A message from Aurelia popped up on the screen. It was fragmented, but the crew could make out one word. They are here. Before anyone could react, the walls of the ship seemed to ripple, as though the very fabric of space itself was bending around them. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed from the halls. Something was moving, and it wasn't human. Suddenly, the doors to the command deck slammed shut, locking them in. Why? The crew stared at each other in disbelief. What's happening? Aaron shouted, his voice filled with panic. We're trapped. Not yet, Captain North said, her voice grim. We fight back. We have the weapons systems. We'll figure this out. But when she tried to access the ship's weapon controls, nothing happened. The systems were dead. The shields were still up, but their weapons, their only defense, were completely offline. They've taken everything, Sarah said, her eyes wide with realization. They've disabled the ship. So the lights flickered once again, and then everything went dark. The crew was plunged into total blackness. The hum that had filled the air earlier was gone, replaced by an eerie silence. Captain Aaron's voice was barely a whisper. What do we do now? Captain North's mind raced. They were trapped. The alien force had boarded their ship and rendered their weapons useless. They had no way to fight back, but she couldn't let fear consume her. There had to be another way. We wait, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. We wait and watch. They want us to fear them, but we have something they don't. We have humanity's will to survive. The crew stood together in the dark, listening intently for any signs of movement. They didn't know what was coming next, but they knew they had to be ready. The ship's systems had been compromised, and the alien forces were on board. They were no longer just explorers. They were intruders in a world far beyond their understanding. Suddenly, the silence was broken by a loud, screeching sound from somewhere deep within the ship. The metal walls of the horizon groaned as if something enormous was moving through. Then it came. A shadow emerged from the darkness. At first, it was just a figure, a silhouette, but then it stepped into the faint light from the emergency panels. It was like nothing the crew had ever seen before. Tall, spindly limbs with elongated fingers. and a face that was a nightmare of alien features, glowing eyes, sharp, jagged edges along its skin, and a mouth that seemed to gape open unnaturally wide. The creature took a slow, deliberate step toward them. "We are not alone," Captain North said, her voice filled with a chilling certainty. The creature hissed again, a sound that made the crew's blood run cold, and then it spoke, its voice like nails on a chalkboard. "Why do you persist?" it demanded. "You have already lost." The creature loomed in front of them, its unnatural form shifting and undulating in the dim light. Its glowing eyes pierced through the darkness, locking on to Captain Elizabeth North with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. She fought the urge to step back. No matter how terrifying the being in front of her was, she couldn't show fear. She couldn't show weakness. "Why do you persist?" The creature's voice echoed through the room, its tone low and guttural, like the scrape of metal on stone. It was a voice that carried centuries of sorrow, pain, and something darker, something ancient. The crew stood frozen, unable to move or speak. The ship's AI Aurelia had gone silent, and there was no way to communicate with the outside world. The alien entity had severed all ties to their home galaxy. They were truly alone, trapped in this floating nightmare. Captain North was the first to speak, her voice steady, despite the fear crawling through her chest. "We didn't come here to harm you. We came to explore, to understand." Her words felt hollow, even to her own ears, as though the creature before her knew something far deeper than what she was saying. The alien tilted its head, as if considering her words. Its long, thin fingers stretched out toward her, and for a moment she thought it might reach out to touch her. The thought made her stomach churn. "You understand nothing," it replied, its voice now tinged with something darker. "You are trespassers in a place you were never meant to find. This ship, this thing you call your horizon, is nothing but a toy compared to the forces you are meddling with." Captain North swallowed hard. "What do you want from us?" she asked, trying to hide the trembling in her voice. The alien's eyes flickered with an emotion she couldn't read. Danger, perhaps, or something far more ancient. "What I want," it said slowly, "is for you to leave. You have been warned. You cannot comprehend the forces you are meddling with. You were never meant to awaken what is buried here." The words sent a chill through the crew. They had known this mission was risky, but nothing could have prepared them for this moment. They had stumbled onto something far more dangerous than they could ever imagine. Sarah Lee, the ship's science officer, stepped forward cautiously. "We didn't mean to disturb anything," she said, her voice shaky but filled with determination. "But we're here now, and we're not just going to leave without understanding what's happening. What is this place? What is buried here? The aliens?" Gaze shifted to Sarah, and the crew could almost feel the weight of its centuries-old wisdom bearing down on them. It seemed to study her for a moment, as if it was weighing whether or not to answer. Finally, it spoke. "This is a grave," it said, its voice now softer, almost sorrowful. "A tomb. You have awoken something that should have remained undisturbed. You freed a force so ancient, so destructive, that it will be the end of you and of everything you hold dear." A chill ran down Captain North's spine as she realized the gravity of the situation. They weren't just dealing with an alien force. They had stumbled upon something much darker, something older than anything they could comprehend. "How do we stop it?" Captain North demanded. "Tell us how to stop this." The alien did not answer immediately. Instead, it seemed to lose focus for a moment, its glowing eyes narrowing as if it were searching for something deep within the ship itself. "You cannot stop what has already been set in motion," it said at last. "The forces are already awake." The awakening was inevitable, and now you will feel the consequences." As it spoke, the ship suddenly lurched violently, sending the crew stumbling. The walls around them shook, and a low, rumbling noise filled the air like the sound of something vast and powerful stirring. "What was that?" Aaron Delgado shouted, his voice filled with panic. "What's happening to the ship?" "We're being pulled into something," Sarah said, her eyes wide with fear. "Something is grabbing us, warping the very fabric of space around us." Captain North's eyes darted to the view screen. The object they had been approaching earlier, the massive, shifting anomaly, was no longer just a distant shape. It was now directly in front of them, expanding at an unnatural rate, its form rippling and distorting as if reality itself were being stretched thin. "Brace for impact." Captain North shouted. She had no idea what was coming next, but the sense of doom was overwhelming. It was as if the entire ship had become a plaything in the hands of some ancient/malevolent force. The ship lurched again, this time more violently. The lights flickered, and for a moment, everything was plunged into darkness. The crew heard the unmistakable sound of metal scraping against metal, followed by the grinding of gears. Suddenly, the ship was pulled forward, hurtling toward the swirling mass in front of them with terrifying speed. It was as if the ship had been caught in some kind of gravitational pull, drawn inexorably toward the unknown. "Hold on," Captain North shouted, gripping the edge of the control panel as the ship shook violently beneath them. "Everyone, brace yourselves." But it was too late. The horizon was caught in the grip of the anomaly, unable to escape. The ship shuddered one last time before everything went still. The lights returned, but the atmosphere was different. The air felt thick, heavy. The ship was no longer in normal space, it was somewhere else, somewhere far beyond their understanding. We've crossed over," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "We're in another dimension. A rift. We've entered a space between worlds." Captain North stared at the view screen, her breath catching in her throat. The ship was now surrounded by an endless void of dark. Swirling expanse of empty space, broken only by flashes of strange, erratic light. There were no stars, no planets, only the darkness. "Where are we?" Aaron whispered, his voice barely audible. The alien that had been standing before them now turned, its eyes narrowing in what could only be described as disappointment. "You have entered a place where you do not belong," it said, its voice low and cold. "And now there is no going back." "Please," Captain North said, her voice filled with a desperate edge. "We didn't know. We never meant to cause harm." "What is this place? What is going to happen to us?" The alien looked at her, its expression unreadable. "You will be tested," it said simply. "You have awakened what was meant to stay buried. Now you will face the consequences of your actions." Before Captain North could respond, the ship shook again, this time with such force that the crew had to hold on to whatever they could to stay upright. The view screen began to flicker, and an image began to form in the darkness, an image of something terrible. Something enormous. It was a massive, ancient structure, floating in the void, its jagged edges covered in strange symbols and markings. It was like nothing they had ever seen, an artifact of unimaginable power. "The end has come," the alien whispered, almost as if to itself. "The power of the void is awakening. You cannot escape it." Captain North's mind raced as she tried to comprehend what was happening. The creature's words echoed in her mind, and she realized with growing horror that they hadn't just discovered an alien race. They had uncovered something far worse, an ancient force buried for millennia, now awakening to reclaim the universe. As the ship drifted toward the massive structure, she knew they were running out of time. The ship was trapped in a rift between dimensions, pulled into a cosmic nightmare where the rules of reality no longer applied, and worse. They had no idea what horrors awaited them within that massive structure. Prepare for what comes next. Captain North said, her voice filled with a resolve she hadn't felt before. We will survive this. But deep down, she wasn't sure if that was even possible. The dark expanse around them stretched out like an endless void. The horizon was caught in a strange rift between dimensions, its engines silent and its systems unstable. No longer in the space they once knew, they were now prisoners of something. Far beyond their understanding, the alien structure and ancient. Jagged mass of twisted metal and glowing symbols loomed ahead, pulsating with an eerie light. Every time Captain Elizabeth North looked at it, the feeling of dread only deepened. It was as though the ship was being pulled toward its inevitable doom, the structure's gravitational force like a magnet, pulling them closer with each passing moment. Captain, the ship's engines are completely offline, Aaron Delgado reported, his voice tense as he studied the ship's control panel. We can't break free from this pull. It's like we're stuck in some sort of cosmic web. We're not the only ones stuck here, Sarah Lee, the science officer, added. This rift, it's not natural. We've entered a place that doesn't follow the same laws of physics. Whatever that structure is, it's controlling the space around us. Captain North gripped the edge of the command panel, her knuckles white. The weight of their situation pressed down on her chest. They had crossed a line they could never return from. But that wasn't what bothered her most. What terrified her was the growing realization that whatever awaited them inside that massive structure was far worse than any alien force they had encountered. It was something primal, something ancient. We need to make a decision, Captain North said, her voice steady but filled with the weight of leadership. We're running out of time. The longer we stay in this rift, the more unstable the ship becomes. We need to find a way out, or we confront whatever is controlling this anomaly. The crew exchanged uncertain glances. They had come so far, but now the stakes were higher than they had ever imagined. Escape seemed impossible, but the alternative, venturing into the heart of the unknown, was just as dangerous. We can't just sit here and wait for the unknown to consume us, Lieutenant Delgado said, his voice firm. We need to take action, but which way do we go? What if entering the structure is the only way to survive? I don't believe that structure will save us, Sarah replied, shaking her head. If anything, it will be our tomb. This whole place is wrong. The very air feels thick, like it's suffocating us. Captain North's gaze shifted to the view screen, where the glowing structure loomed larger with every passing second. The closer they got, the more disturbing the patterns in the metal seemed. Twisted symbols flickered across its surface, and the pulsating light grew more intense, as if it were alive, waiting for them. You're right, Captain North said, the weight of their choices pressing down on her. But we can't sit idly by and hope for a miracle. We need answers. If that structure is what brought us here, then it might hold the key to getting out. The ship lurched again, a violent shaking that threw the crew off balance. The metal walls groaned, and the lights flickered in a pattern that seemed almost deliberate, like a warning. It was clear the ship was reaching its breaking point. A loud mechanical screech echoed through the ship. The sound was deafening, rattling the very bones of the horizon. It was as if the rift was trying to consume them whole. What was that? Aaron shouted, looking at the control panel in a panic. Systems are failing at an accelerating rate, Sarah reported, her voice strained. We're losing power. We have minutes, maybe seconds before we're completely offline. Then we make our move now, Captain North decided, her voice sharp with authority. Prepare for docking with that structure. If we can get close enough, we might be able to figure out what's controlling this rift. The crew worked quickly, their hands flying over the panels, doing everything they could to keep the ship steady as they approached the glowing structure. The closer they got, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The walls of the horizon seemed to groan louder, and the ship's engines stuttered as though they were about to fail entirely. "Captain, I don't know how much longer we can hold on," Sarah said, her voice filled with anxiety. "Whatever's in that structure, it's drawing energy from us. It's feeding off the ship's power. Just keep us steady," Captain North said, her eyes fixed on the strange artifact ahead. "We have to get inside. We have no choice." The alien structure was now close enough that the crew could make out the shifting patterns on its surface more clearly. The shapes seemed to move, as if alive, their edges rippling and changing in an unnerving dance. It was like staring into the heart of a living organism, one that breathed and pulsed with energy. "We're almost there," Aaron said, his voice tight. With apprehension, "I don't know how we're going to land." "The surface, it's not flat. It's moving." Captain North nodded. "We're not landing. We're docking. Prepare the airlocks. I'll lead the away team." "Are you sure about this, Captain?" Sarah asked, her voice faltering. "What if this is a trap? What if we're walking straight into something we can't survive?" "There's no turning back now," Captain North said, her tone resolute. "We either face whatever is in there, or we face our death here, adrift in the void. The choice is made." The crew worked in silence as the horizon edged closer to the structure. The air was thick with tension. They could all feel its pull of the unknown. The structure's power, its ancient presence, was overwhelming. But Captain North refused to let fear take hold. She had led them this far, and she would not falter now. With one final, spine-jarring lurch, the horizon's docking mechanism latched onto the outer edge of the structure. The ship groaned in protest as if it were resisting the contact, but it was too late. They were connected. The away team, consisting of Captain North, Aaron, Sarah, and 2 additional crew members, suited up quickly. Their movements mechanical but purposeful. They knew the risks, but there was no other choice. "We move fast," Captain North ordered as she slid into her helmet, her voice muffled but commanding. "We go in, find the source of the anomaly, and if we can, shut it down. But we stay together. No one strays from the group." The airlock hissed open, and the crew stepped out into the unknown. The exterior of the structure was unlike anything they had ever encountered. It was smooth, yet somehow rippling like liquid stone. The surface felt alive beneath their boots, as if the entire structure was breathing, shifting with their every movement as they ventured further inside. The walls began to glow, faint patterns emerging from the darkness, tracing the paths they walked. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the air became. The temperature dropped, and an unsettling silence filled the space, broken only by the sounds of their footsteps. "There's something ahead," Aaron said, his voice tense as he pointed toward a large circular opening in the distance. It was surrounded by pulsating energy, and as they approached, they felt a low vibration in the air. "Stay alert," Captain North said, her eyes scanning the surroundings. "Whatever's controlling this anomaly is close. We have to stop it before it's too late." The crew approached the opening, and as they stepped through, they found themselves in a massive chamber. The walls were covered in the same swirling patterns, but now they were accompanied by something more ancient. Dark energy that seemed to pulse with a malevolent force. In the center of the chamber stood an enormous artifact. A massive crystalline structure, its surface glowing with an ethereal light. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, an object of unimaginable power. "This is it," Sarah whispered, her voice filled with awe and dread. "This is what's controlling everything." Before Captain North could respond, the air around them shimmered, and a voice echoed through the chamber. It was deep, ancient, and filled with an otherworldly power. "You have awakened the heart of the void," the voice boomed, "and now you will pay the price for your curiosity." The crew froze, the full weight of their situation crashing down on them. There was no turning back. They had come this far, and now they were face to face with the source of the anomaly. The true horror had only just begun. The words of the ancient voice still reverberated through the chamber, hanging in the air like a dense fog. You have awakened the heart of the void, and now you will pay the price for your curiosity. The crew stood frozen, unable to move. There, breaths shallow and quick, but they knew one thing for certain. There was no turning back. The crystalline structure in the center of the chamber pulsed with an eerie, otherworldly light. The walls of the chamber seemed to shift, their dark patterns twisting in response to the presence of the crew. It was as if the entire space was alive. Reacting to their intrusion, Captain Elizabeth North was the first to regain control of her senses. She took a deep breath, pushing aside the overwhelming sense of dread that gripped her heart. There was no time for fear. They had come too far, and they had to finish what they started. "Stay focused," she said, her voice low but firm. "We're not leaving here without answers. Whatever is in that crystal, whatever power it holds, we need to understand it. We need to stop it." Lieutenant Aaron Delgado's eyes were wide, his face pale as he scanned the chamber. "Captain, that thing," he gestured. "Toward the crystal, it's alive. I can feel it. It's calling to us. It's like it's ... feeding on us." Sarah Lee, the science officer, stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the structure. "Well, it's more than just alive, Aaron. I think it's controlling everything the rift. The anomaly, the very fabric of space we're trapped in. This is the source. If we don't stop it, we'll never leave. The entire universe could be at its mercy." Captain North nodded grimly. "Then we do whatever it takes to destroy it. We don't give it the chance to use us as fuel for its power." The voice echoed again, deep and resonant, a strange mix of anger and sorrow. "You cannot stop what you have awakened. The void will consume you, and everything you've known will be lost. It is the way of the universe." The air around them shimmered, and suddenly the room seemed to distort. The walls began to bend and twist, like they were made of liquid, warping and shifting around them. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and a low hum filled the chamber. Growing louder with each passing second, Captain North clenched her fists, steeling herself against the rising panic. "We're running out of time. We have to act now." She turned to Sarah, her voice urgent. "Do you have any idea how to disable it?" Sarah studied the crystal, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I've never seen anything like it, Captain. It's not just a power source. It's a gateway. It's tapping into a force beyond our understanding, something ancient. If we could disrupt its connection to the rift, we might be able to sever its hold over the ship. But I don't know how." "Then we find a way," Captain North said firmly. "If it's using the ship's power, we need to cut it off. We can't let it control us anymore." Aaron stepped forward, his voice filled with determination. "If it's feeding off the ship's energy, maybe we can reverse the flow turn, the power against it. I might be able to reroute the core's energy, redirect it into the chamber." "It's worth a shot," Sarah said, her voice tense with the weight of the decision. "But if we do that, we need to be ready. It could destabilize everything. The ship might collapse, and whatever's inside that crystal might get even more dangerous." Captain North nodded. "We don't have a choice. We either fight or we die here. We won't let it win." The crew quickly moved into position, their hands moving over their consoles as they prepared to execute their plan. Captain North remained focused, her eyes never leaving the shimmering crystal in the center of the chamber. It seemed to respond to their actions, its light pulsing in time with the vibrations that now filled the air. "Rerouting energy now," Aaron muttered under his breath as he worked furiously at the control panel. The ship's systems were failing. but he was able to bypass some of the damaged circuits and get through to the core. "We need more time," Sarah said, her voice strained. "The crystal is accelerating its power. If we don't disable it soon, we'll be too late." Captain North glanced at her crew. "Stay with it. We can do this. We can stop it." The air around them seemed to darken as the crystal's energy grew stronger. The walls of the chamber rippled and the ground shook again, this time more violently. The creature that had first spoken to them, the one that had warned them, reappeared in the doorway, its massive, spindly figure casting a long shadow over the crew. It was no longer just a mere presence. It was a physical force, and it was moving toward them. "You cannot stop the void," the creature growled, its voice vibrating the very air around them. "The heart of the void is eternal. It has existed since the dawn of time, and it will remain long after you are gone. You are nothing more than ants, scurrying to understand a force far beyond your comprehension." "We'll see about that, Captain." North shot back, her voice filled with defiance. "We're not giving up. Not now. Not ever." The creature snarled, its long arms reaching out. But before it could move any closer, a sudden burst of energy shot from the ship's core. The chamber was filled with a blinding light, and the crystal in the center of the room screamed in response, its glow flickering erratically. The walls of the chamber seemed to collapse inward, twisting in agony as the energy from the ship's core surged through the chamber. "We did it," Aaron shouted, his voice full of triumph. But the victory was short-lived. The creature let out a deafening roar as the chamber shuddered violently. The energy from the crystal was unstable now, and the ship's systems were struggling. To keep up, the entire structure seemed to be reacting to the disruption, warping and twisting, threatening to collapse. "Everyone, move," Captain North commanded. "We're not out of this yet." The crew sprinted toward the airlock, their hearts pounding in their chests. The structure was collapsing around them, and the rift was beginning to destabilize. They had triggered something in the crystal, something far more dangerous than they had realized. The alien creature was still pursuing them, its long limbs stretching across the collapsing chamber as it howled in rage. It was clear now, the creature wasn't just an alien, it was a guardian, protecting something far more powerful. But even it couldn't stop the tide of destruction that was now crashing down upon them. "Get to the airlock," Captain North shouted. As the walls began to crack, the glowing patterns on the walls flickering and disappearing. The ship's internal systems were failing, but the airlock doors were still functional. They had to make it there. The crew ran through the corridors of the crumbling structure, their footsteps echoing in the chaos. The walls around them were falling apart, and the energy from the heart of the void was threatening to tear the ship apart. As they reached the airlock, Sarah turned back, her face pale with fear. "It's not going to hold much longer. The whole structure is coming down." "We don't have much time," Captain North said, her voice urgent. "Get in the airlock now." The crew scrambled into the airlock, the doors closing behind them with a heavy final thud. For a moment, everything was silent, but the silence didn't last long. The ship's systems flickered one last time, and the crew felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of weightlessness. The horizon was free from the rift, but the cost had been immense. The creature's voice echoed one final time, distant and mournful. "You may have won today, but the void is eternal. You cannot escape the consequences." The airlock doors opened, and the crew was ejected back into the void of space. The horizon was free, but they knew their journey had only just begun. The horizon drifted in the blackness of space, silent and still. The chaotic roar of the collapsing structure was nothing more than a distant echo in the crew's minds. The emergency lights flickered weakly on the ship's interior, casting long shadows on the walls. The feeling of weightlessness had dissipated. But the weight of what had just occurred, The cosmic battle they had fought hung heavy in the air. Captain Elizabeth North stood at the command deck. Her hands clenched tightly around the control panel as she stared out into the vast emptiness. The anomaly was gone. The rift they had been trapped in had vanished, but the truth was harder to comprehend. They had survived, yes, but at what cost? And what did their survival mean? "Status report," she said, her voice steady despite the exhaustion that dragged at her. "Acknowledged," Lieutenant Aaron Delgado replied, his fingers tapping on the console. "Ship systems are back online, but there are significant damages. We've lost several key systems communications. Propulsion and navigational controls are unstable. But we're alive, and we're clear of the anomaly." Sarah Lee, the science officer, joined them at the command deck, her face pale but determined. "The rift is closed. Whatever that force was, it's gone. But I don't think we can claim victory just yet. The energy from the heart of the void is still present in our systems. It's like a lingering trace spreading through the ship." "The ship is alive, Captain. In a way, it's infected." Captain North's eyes narrowed as she processed Sarah's words. "Infected? You mean the ship is still under its influence?" Sarah nodded, her voice tinged with concern. "Exactly. The energy, whatever it was, didn't just disappear. It's like it left an imprint on our ship, on us. I can feel it. It's subtle, but it's there. The heart of the void wasn't just a power source, it was a gateway, and it's still affecting us." A heavy silence fell over the room. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, their minds racing to process everything they had just encountered. They had fought the unknown, confronted an ancient force, and survived a catastrophic event that had nearly torn their reality apart. But now, they were left with a greater question. What had they truly defeated? And what was left of them in the wake of it? "We need to get out of here," Captain North said quietly, her voice cutting through the tension. "If the rift is closed, we need to head home. We don't know how much longer we can keep the ship under control. Let's get back to Earth, assess what's left of our systems, and figure out what to do next." Aaron's fingers flew across the control panel, trying to access the navigational systems. "I agree, Captain, but there's a problem. We've lost our primary propulsion system. We can't generate enough thrust to leave this area without it. We're adrift." "What do you mean, adrift?" Captain North demanded. "We've got to be able to fix something. We've got backup systems, don't we?" "We do," Aaron replied. "But even if we manage to get something working, it'll take weeks, if not months, to get back to Earth. And there's something else. The ship's energy levels are fluctuating. It's like the heart of the void is still trying to pull us back in. It's as if the ship itself is fighting us." The crew fell into an uneasy silence as the enormity of the situation sank in. They had thought that surviving the encounter with the alien structure, escaping the rift, would be enough. But now they were stuck in the void of space with no way to return home and no answers about the force they had just faced. Suddenly, a loud alarm blared, cutting through the tension. The crew jumped in surprise as the warning light flashed across the control panel. "What now?" Aaron shouted, his fingers flying across the screen to try to silence the alarm. "Captain," Sarah said urgently, her eyes wide with shock. "There's something out there. A ship. It's coming toward us, and it's not ours." "Could it be a rescue ship?" Captain North asked, hope rising in her chest. "I don't think so," Aaron said, his voice filled with growing concern. "It's not on any known frequency. It's alien." The crew turned to the view screen as an enormous shape appeared in the distance, slowly approaching the horizon. It was a massive ship, far larger than anything they had ever seen. Its surface was dark and slick, reflecting the faint light from the dying stars in the distance. The design was unfamiliar, covered in strange symbols. much like the structure they had just escaped, the creature they had encountered earlier. Now clearly an entity of immense power appeared on the screen, its form shimmering in and out of focus. Its eyes glowed a deep, menacing red, its spindly limbs twitching as it watched them. "You've escaped." The voice of the alien echoed through the ship's comm system. "But you cannot escape the consequences. You have meddled with forces far beyond your comprehension. And now the void comes for you." Captain North's heart pounded as the ship's systems began to flicker. The alien ship was sending out waves of energy that were disrupting their control systems, interfering with everything they tried to do. "What do you want from us?" Captain North shouted, her voice filled with defiance. "We've done nothing to you." The alien creature's glowing eyes narrowed. "You awoke the heart of the void, and now you are its burden. You are the ones who brought the consequences upon yourselves." A low hum filled the command deck as the alien ship moved closer. It wasn't just a ship, it was a force. The very presence of it seemed to warp the fabric of space around them. They could feel that something terrible was coming. The alien force had not forgiven them, and now they were being drawn back into the very heart of the rift they had escaped. "We need to do something," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "If it's true that the ship is still connected to the void, we can't just let it pull us back in. We have to sever the connection, or we'll be dragged into that darkness again." "We don't have the power to fight it," Aaron said grimly. "We're barely holding on as it is. And this ship, it's like it's alive. It knows everything we do before we even do it." Captain North's mind raced. They had already faced so much. They had defied the odds and escaped the rift. But now they were being pulled back into the unknown, and this time there was no certainty of survival. The alien force was relentless, and it was clear they would stop at nothing to reclaim what they had lost. "We don't have much time," Captain North said, her voice resolute. "We make one final stand. We take the fight to them." The crew turned to face the alien entity, their minds filled with a mixture of fear, determination, and defiance. The alien ship was now close enough to feel the tremors of its power. The crew knew that if they didn't act soon, they would be. Powerless to stop it, Captain North stepped forward, her voice steady despite the weight of the situation. "We've come this far. We've faced the void. We've escaped it. And now we'll finish this. For all of us." With that, she turned to her crew. "Prepare to fight. It's not over yet."